These cartoons were buried so deep, even animation historians blink twice. No syndication reruns, no nostalgic DVD box sets, just whispers in fan forums and dusty archives. From bizarre hybrids to long-lost imports, these forgotten tunes defined strange. Prepare to uncover 14 cartoons from the past you have probably never heard of, and wait till you see the one that starred a shape-shifting U.S. president. Number 14. The Secret Lives of Waldo Kitty, 1975. Before parodies flooded primetime, there was Waldo Kitty, a shy domesticated cat who escaped his boring reality by reimagining himself as legendary heroes. Think Batcat, Catman and Robin, Captain Hero Kitty. But here's the twist. The show mixed live-action segments with animated fantasies. Waldo's daydreams were Saturday morning's answer to pop culture commentary long before the genre had a name. Created by Filmation and aired on NBC, the series faced immediate backlash, not from parents, but from author James Thurber's estate. The original pitch spoofed Thurber's The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, but without proper licensing, the producers were forced to change names midway through. The title stayed Waldo Kitty, but legal threats loomed like a sword, and that was just the beginning of its identity crisis. The animation was classic Filmation. Limited motion, recycled backgrounds, and stiff facial expressions. Yet the humor was oddly ahead of its time. It satirized TV cliches, superhero tropes, and even gender stereotypes. Waldo's crush, Felicia, often outsmarted him. His nemesis, Tyrone, was a bulldog modeled after authoritarian figures. Kids didn't get it. Adults weren't watching. And NBC gave it the axe after just 13 episodes. Today, only bootlegs and fan-made restorations survive. Waldo Kitty remains a strange blip in cartoon history, an ambitious hybrid too smart for kids and too silly for adults, a cat caught between mediums. Number 13. Bucky and Papito, 1959. Even among cartoon collectors, Bucky and Papito is whispered like a cautionary tale. Produced by Sam Singer, who also gave us the equally strange Pow Wow the Indian Boy, this short-lived series was an unintentional masterclass in how not to animate. Bad lip sync, repetitive backgrounds, lazy walk cycles. But what really sank it was its wildly inappropriate content. Bucky was a bland all-American cowboy. Pepito, his Mexican sidekick, was every stereotype rolled into one. Oversized sombrero, thick accent, broken English, and a permanent grin. The duo wandered aimlessly solving pseudo-mysteries and facing villains that often looked like rejected doodles. Episodes were sometimes only 5 minutes long, yet still felt stretched thin. The show was syndicated to local stations rather than a national network, which meant parents caught episodes too late. Complaints about racial caricatures and low-quality animation flooded broadcasters. Within a year, Bucky and Papito vanished from airwaves. No reruns, no VHS releases, just a handful of archived episodes gathering dust. To modern eyes, it's painful. Papito is a relic of post-war America's casual racism, but buried beneath the crude ink and tone-deaf writing is a lesson in animation history, sometimes forgotten for good reason, sometimes remembered to ensure we never go backward. Number 12. The Funny Company, 1963. Not all forgotten cartoons were offensive. Some were just weird. The Funny Company was the brainchild of Ken Snyder and Charles Corrin, a strange hybrid of public service announcement and comedy skit. Created during the Kennedy-era educational boom, this show tried to teach kids science, history, and social skills, in between songs about toast and aliens. Each episode featured the Funny Company gang, a group of squeaky-voiced kids running a club that somehow owned a lab, a time machine, and a hotline to famous scientists. Every story would awkwardly pivot into a mini-lecture with a real-life educational film strip inserted mid-episode. One moment they're building a spaceship out of cardboard, the next you're learning about the Panama Canal. The animation was minimal. Think stick figures with hats, but the voices were pure chaos. Overlapping dialogue, sound effects, reused from old radio shows, and a laugh track that seemed to play at random. The tone was earnest, too earnest, like your teacher doing stand-up comedy at a pep rally. Yet despite its bizarre structure, the show aired nationally and even spawned comic books and merchandise. But once school curriculums evolved and networks stopped needing filler PSAs, it disappeared. Today, few remember it ever existed, and maybe that's what made The Funny Company so surreal. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good. It was just there, waiting to educate, or confuse, or both. Number 11. The King Kong Show, 1966. Long before anime took over Western airwaves, there was The King Kong Show, a strange collaboration between Japan's Toei Animation and America's Rankin Bass. It was the first cartoon to star the mighty ape as a misunderstood hero. But instead of skyscrapers and screams, Kong fought robots, mad scientists, and giant monsters, alongside two kids and their dog. Each episode began with Kong saving the Bond family, and ended with him battling absurd threats like electric dinosaurs or laser-eyed crabs. The animation had a distinct Japanese style, but was slowed down by American scripting. That clash made it feel disjointed, energetic one moment, wooden the next. Yet the character design was bold and striking. You could feel Toei trying to break out of the Hanna-Barbera mold. Interestingly, this series introduced Mechani Kong, a robotic doppelganger that would later inspire Mechagodzilla. It also set the stage for Kong's future anime-like appearances, and even influenced the 1967 film King Kong Escapes. Despite its innovations, The King Kong Show only ran one season. It was too foreign for American kids and too juvenile for Japanese teens. Reruns disappeared by the early 70s. No merchandise survived beyond a few rare comics. But in retrospect, it was a pivotal moment, East meeting West through an iconic beast. Forgotten by most, but foundational for many. Number 10. Max, the 2,000-year-old mouse, 1967. If you ever watched Max, the 2,000-year-old mouse as a child, you probably remember one thing: that voice. Dry, monotone narration, delivered by Bernard Cowan with the enthusiasm of a librarian reading tax code. Yet somehow, it burned into your brain. This Canadian animated series used Max, a time-traveling mouse, as a guide through world history. One episode, he'd witness Napoleon. The next, he'd ride a Viking ship. But instead of showing action, Max stood still while recycled film strip images rolled by. Minimal motion, no background music. And yet it aired for years across North America. The intent was noble: educate children through historical storytelling. But the execution was painfully bare-bones. Animation was often still shots, panned slowly. The same clip of Max blinking appeared in every episode. Kids were either mesmerized or asleep by the midpoint. Despite its limitations, Max has a cult following. Teachers loved it. Students endured it. And oddly enough, its structure inspired later edutainment shows. But Max never had toys, shirts, or lunchboxes. He simply existed, 2,000 years old and barely moving. A cartoon more ghost than icon. Number 9. Luno the White Stallion, 1964. There was something dreamlike about Luno the White Stallion, created by Terry Toons, the same studio that gave us Mighty Mouse. This quiet series followed a young boy named Tim, who whispered a magical rhyme and summoned a flying white horse named Luno. They'd soar into the sky and enter storybook realms where myth and fantasy blurred. Each episode had Tim and Luno encounter giants, pirates, dragons, or aliens. But instead of action-packed battles, the stories unfolded slowly and poetically. Narration dominated over dialogue. Backgrounds were pastel and cloudy. It felt more like a bedtime fable than a Saturday morning cartoon. There was no slapstick, no zany sidekicks, just calm, mystical adventures with surprisingly dark undertones. What made Luno unique was its tone. Melancholic, thoughtful, almost haunting. Few cartoons dared to slow down and embrace silence. It didn't last long. Luno was often shown as part of other shows like The Hector Heathcote Show, and never had a standalone run. Today, it's rarely referenced and barely archived. But for those who saw it in passing, it remains unforgettable. A white horse that whispered wonder and disappeared into the sky. Number 8. The Reluctant Dragon and Mr. Toad Show, 1970. What happens when classic British literature meets slapstick American animation? You get The Reluctant Dragon and Mr. Toad Show, a strange Hanna-Barbera production based loosely on the works of Kenneth Grahame. But this wasn't some faithful adaptation of The Wind in the Willows. This was chaos in cartoon form. Split into 2 rotating segments, the show featured Mr. Toad getting into wild adventures with his anthropomorphic pals, while the Reluctant Dragon delivered parables with a side of deadpan humor. But forget subtlety. Mr. Toad's escapades often involved space aliens, time travel, and improbable gadgets. and the reluctant dragon was less poetic sage and more sarcastic lounge act in dragon skin. Animation was standard Hanna-Barbera, reused backgrounds, stiff cycles, and exaggerated voices. But the writing was where things got weird. Jokes leaned into absurdism and slapstick with little narrative logic. One episode had Mr. Toad build a rocket to fight parking meters. Another had the dragon babysitting a cyclops. The show aired as part of ABC's Saturday morning lineup, but couldn't hold young attention spans. Its literary origins were too diluted for educators, and its gags too erratic for kids. After a single season, it vanished. No reruns, no revival. Today, it's a curiosity, a show that tried to bridge highbrow storytelling with lowbrow chaos, and in doing so, forgot its own point entirely. Number 7. Tales of the Wizard of Oz, 1961. You think you know Oz? Think again. This Canadian animated series reimagined the land of Oz as a slapstick neighborhood full of bickering neighbors and sitcom setups. Produced by Crawley Films for Videocraft International, this was not a journey through wonder. It was a weekly routine with the Tin Man filing complaints and the Scarecrow messing up yard work. Characters were radically redesigned. The Wicked Witch sounded like a New York landlady. Toto talked in fluent sarcasm. Dorothy was often absent, and the episodes were only 5 minutes long, airing in short bursts or as interstitials between larger shows. The animation was crude, but stylized with jagged character lines and surreal angles. Every backdrop felt like a cutout stage. Every scene played like a skit from a community theater production of The Jetsons. It was charming in its awkwardness and wildly ahead of its time in postmodern humor. The show faded quickly in the US, but lingered in Canada and parts of Europe. Decades later, fragments surfaced on YouTube, sparking interest from Oz completists and cartoon scholars, but it remains elusive and largely forgotten. Tales of the Wizard of Oz wasn't magical, it was manic, and somehow that makes it unforgettable. Number 6. Super President, 1967. Yes, this was real. Super President aired during the Cold War when paranoia met patriotism, and Saturday mornings turned surreal. The plot? The President of the United States gains superpowers after a cosmic storm and secretly fights crime, using his ability to transform into steel rock or mist. Voiced by Paul Frees, the President also had a boy sidekick and an underground lair. He fought everything from alien threats to rogue scientists, all while delivering press conferences by day and punching evil by night. Think Superman meets the Oval Office with none of the restraint. Produced by Prbably, the animation wasn't terrible, but the concept was baffling. Critics and parents were horrified. Editorials blasted it as un-American fantasy. NBC pulled it after just 13 episodes. No reruns, no merchandise, no chance. Yet it developed a cult following for being so absurd it circled back to genius. Today it's studied not as quality animation, but as cultural artifact. A mirror of its time when anything, even the White House, could become a cape-wearing cartoon. Number 5. The Barkleys, 1972. Before Family Guy, before The Simpsons, there was The Barkleys, an animated sitcom about a family of talking dogs trying to navigate everyday life in the suburbs. Inspired by the live-action show All in the Family, it featured a gruff, blue-collar patriarch named Arnie, who often clashed with his wife Agnes and their 3 very human-like kids. Arnie's voice and mannerisms mirrored Archie Bunker, and the show leaned heavily into topical humor. Issues like school politics, neighborhood disputes, and even gender roles were tackled with surprising bluntness, filtered, of course, through cartoon dog logic. One episode had Arnie arguing with a women's rights activist. Another featured a PTA meeting that spiraled into total chaos. Produced by Prbably. The Barkleys had warm pastel backgrounds and decent voice acting, but the jokes often landed flat. Its social commentary felt forced, and its animation lacked the charm of more stylized contemporaries. Even the theme song, a bouncy jazz riff, couldn't elevate the tone. It ran only 1 season and disappeared almost immediately. Syndication was rare, and the series faded into obscurity. Occasionally it surfaces on bootleg DVDs or retro cartoon forums, where it's praised more for ambition than execution. Today, The Barkleys is remembered as a noble misfire, a show that tried to bring primetime satire to Saturday morning and proved dogs might be lovable, but they're not always funny. Number 4. Butch, Cassidy, and the Sundance Kids, 1973. You know the film, but do you know the cartoon? Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kids took the names of two outlaw legends and gave them guitars, dance moves, and a van. This Hanna-Barbera creation followed a pop band that doubled as secret agents, traveling the globe, solving crimes, and dodging danger in between musical numbers. The group included Butch, their square-jawed leader Sundance, the drummer Steffi, the brains Merrily the telepath, and a dog named Elvis. Their missions were assigned via a talking ring. No, seriously, it glowed and delivered exposition. Think Scooby-Doo meets the Monkees sprinkled with spy fiction. Each episode featured chases, disguise changes, and repetitive music videos that reused the same animation loops. Butch even looked like a recycled Fred from Scooby-Doo. The plots were forgettable, the villains cartoonishly evil, but the energy was pure bubblegum pop. It aired on NBC but was quickly overshadowed by more memorable fare like Josie and the Pussycats or the Jetsons. Its cancellation came swiftly and quietly. The soundtrack never charted, the toys never shipped, and the show slipped into memory's attic. Today it stands as a strange cultural fusion. Rock music, FBI gadgets, and legendary outlaw names repurposed for Saturday morning noise. Number 3. Inch High, Private Eye, 1973. Take a detective, make him 1 inch tall, and you have Inch High, Private Eye. Another Hanna-Barbera oddity, this series followed the pint-sized sleuth as he battled criminals using gadgets twice his size and rode around in a car hilariously called the Hushmobile. Inch High worked for the Finkerton Detective Agency and was joined by his niece Lori, her beefy boyfriend Gator, and their dog Braveheart. The setup was a clear parody of spy tropes and mystery cartoons, but being tiny came with big problems. Hiding in hats, crawling into vending machines, and getting swatted like a bug. The voice acting was quirky with Inch voiced by Lenny Weinrib channeling Don Adams of Get Smart fame. The humor relied on sight gags and wordplay, but the repetition wore thin. One chase sequence looked identical in multiple episodes. Despite its novelty, the show didn't click. It aired briefly on NBC before vanishing without much fanfare. No reruns, no merchandise. Just a lingering question, why make a detective so small he can't reach a doorknob? Still, Inch High had charm. It played with scale before Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and delivered absurd missions with sincerity. It may have been short-lived, but it left a tall impression. Number 2. Mission, Magic, 1973. What do you get when you mix psychedelic magic high school students and a young Rick Springfield? You get Mission, Magic. A kaleidoscopic cartoon so strange it practically levitated off the screen. Produced by Filmation, the show starred an animated version of Springfield as a hip rock teacher guiding teens through alternate dimensions with songs and spells. The premise was wild. Miss Tickle, a teacher with a magic ring, would turn her blackboard into a portal using incantations. Her students, the Adventurers Club, would follow Rick into fantasy realms to solve problems that often symbolized real-world issues. One episode tackled discrimination through a world ruled by robots. Another dived into anti-materialism with floating gold planets. The visuals were a swirl of saturated colors, surreal backgrounds, and geometric creatures that felt pulled from underground comics. The music? Each episode featured an original Rick Springfield song, written for the show, performed mid-adventure. Funky riffs met mystical nonsense. It aired on ABC, but confused most viewers. Was it for kids, teens, music fans? It lasted 1 season, then disappeared. But Springfield later credited it with helping launch his U.S. music career. Today, it's a cult relic, trippy, flawed, and utterly unique. Mission, Magic, was not just a cartoon. It was a portal into a pop culture fever dream that burned fast and vanished like chalk on a blackboard. Number 1. Freddy Cat, 1975. Few cartoons ever matched the surreal dread of Freddy Cat. Created by Filmation, this obscure segment aired as part of Uncle Croc's Block, a bizarre anthology that was canceled so quickly many kids never saw it. The premise? A jittery orange cat haunted by the ghosts of his past 8 lives. Yes, 8 ghostly versions of himself. Each ghost had its own absurd personality. Viking Freddy, Roman Freddy, Cowboy Freddy, and so on. Whenever Freddy accidentally spoke a number from 1 to 8, a ghost would appear uninvited and usually make things worse. His 9th life, the one he was living, was a constant paranoid scramble to avoid danger and escape his spectral past. The animation was minimal but expressive, with exaggerated motion and frantic pacing. The voice acting was pure chaos with over-the-top accents and slapstick yelps. The tone veered into dark comedy with death gags, ghosts, and implied mortality. Not exactly Saturday morning fare. Network executives hated it. The anthology flopped, and Frady Cat was yanked before all episodes even aired. Only 12 out of 18 produced segments were broadcast. The rest remained unseen for decades until bootlegs surfaced online. Today it's considered a hidden gem of gallows humor and narrative experimentation. A cartoon where fear itself was the punchline, and where every meow might summon a ghost. From ghost cats to rock star teachers, these cartoons didn't just fall through the cracks. They were swallowed by the void. Yet for those who remember, they're impossible to forget. If even one title sparked a memory like a dusty VHS tape rewound in your brain, be sure to like and subscribe. More deep dives ahead.